Hello, fellow enjoyers of bass music and sound design. I'm Annihilate, the creator of the track that you clicked on this video to have broken down. This track, Claw and Fang, is a heavy bass house track that I tried to balance heaviness with danceability. It also, interestingly, is my first ever track to have made it onto Spotify Editorial, as it's on Dubstep Dawn, and I'm definitely not going to brag about that a lot. I should probably get into this before you all click off because of my obnoxious voice. Okay, we've made it through my script. I'll just play the intro first so that you can get an idea of what we're working with. And for this breakdown, we'll work our way down section by section. So starting off in the intro with the drums, which there's a lot more than I usually ever have in an intro for drums. We've got these rides, these crashes, and even some claps, which it's not something that I usually ever do. Then there's this bass. This thing morphs throughout everything that it's in, and it's just some patch that I made that was originally supposed to be just a synth, like a lead for it, but it somehow turned into this thing. I won't go into too much detail about it. You can pause and look at it if you want to. It's pretty simple. For sound effects in the intro, there's a bunch of downshifters and risers. Just basically a bunch of stuff going on throughout that, and that even continues into the next section as well. It's got a lot more energy than most of my songs usually would. Now, going into this stuff that's labeled as pre-drop, that's basically all the main stuff that's going on. This is literally just a background thing, but it does a lot, actually. Then there's a bunch of screams that just play throughout most of the song, even into the drop. Some of these are used, I think. This is used in the drop as well. At the very beginning of it, we have crowd noise, which is like the most useful thing ever. So my main thing with writing this track was I wanted to make it very electronic, but still have some orchestral stuff to it. So there's going to be a lot of strings, and this isn't a free plugin, by the way, and I really, really recommend Symphony Orchestra. Layered with more strings. Then we've got this choir that's recorded out. This is a contact choir, isn't it? Nope, it's also in Labs, which is also free. This thing has a lot of processing on it. Most of it to beef it out and make it fit more in the mix. Then we get into the actual dancey stuff. Like this random just saw. Then another choir. These ones are actual contact choirs. Going into this bridge, we immediately make it a lot more dancey instead of it being as much of an intro. For drums in it, there's just a ride. These hats carry this little breakdown thing. They're layered with the same claps as before. This time they're rising up. The vocal from before is still there, just changed a little bit. That bass is also here, but now it's opened up entirely. It's the same downshifters and white noise riser from before with some phaser on it. But now the interesting thing in this breakdown, the vocal.
Oh, nah, break it down now. You move it down now. Move it down now. Watch your waistline. Move your waistline. Rock your waistline. Move your waistline. Break it down now. Break it down now.
This vocal.
Watch your waistline. Move your waistline.
A good bit of processing on it. It's entirely mono, and most of the stuff on it is to make it a lot thicker. I tried to make it stand out as much as I could with as much stuff that's also going on in this area. Then we have some strings, same crowd noise as before. Some sustaining strings, that choir, and this lead, which is extremely basic. It's just two saws and a square that are going through a lot of distortion, being made extremely wide. They have a little bit of delay and reverb, and they're being compressed a lot. Even through the processing as well. It's very basic, just more compression. Then they just go down an octave, and it's just, they're there to make it a lot more dancey. This is a flute that I recorded out that just plays the same melody as everything else. Processing, it's got a little bit of Pancake, which is a free plugin that just allows you to pan everything around. And it's most of the processing is just to make it a lot thicker, just like with pretty much everything else. Just make it stronger.
Break it down now. You move it down now. Move it down now. Watch your waistline. Move your waistline. Rock your waistline. Move your waistline. Break it down now. Break it down now. You move it down now. Move it down now. Watch your waistline. Move your waistline. Rock your waistline. Move your waistline. Down now. Waistline. Break it down now. Down now. Waistline. Break it down now. Down now. Waistline. Break it down now. Down now.
Moving into the build, we got these snares, and now we bring in the drop kick, and then the drop clap, which ends up layering with the kick, just to give it a little bit of energy before it flies into the drop. We've got the same rides that are in the drop, yet again, just like everything else, trying to build up energy for the drop. Crashes, and the same claps that have been playing throughout the entire pre-drop. Now we still have this vocal, but it opens up a lot more, and it starts frequency shifting up, or I guess pitching up. Then a scream that's used in the drop, plus some crowd noise, just ends up going up. And then just pitching up bass, just pitching up sub with the volume automation, just to fill it out more. We've got these little laser things that are also used in the drop. So the bass that was here has been replaced with a variation of the main drop bass that's been turned into just a riser, pretty much. And then it actually turns into it. For the pre-drop vocal, we've got just this random vocal that I found on Splice.
Kill him with the spin now.
And I threw it in here, and it just processed it a ton.
Kill him with the spin now. Kill him with the spin now.
And then this compression is for the basses, because they're all being compressed together. There's a volume automation, just to lower the volume as you go into the drop, and then have it all come back. Not much. This is going down just 5 from 80. It gradually gets less stereo. There's this EQ turns on it, which is basically homemade Endless Smiles, because I didn't purchase it. And it's just automating on the master, this reverb, and this thing, it ends up high passing. And this thing, it ends up high passing. Sound effects, a bunch of downshifters, and then some risers. And then this clap thing that's also been going on. Then there's this vocal, which I tried to incorporate this because it's used as well in the midsection, and I tried to make more sense that the midsection was going to suddenly come in and have pretty much nothing to do with the rest of the song. And the same vocal from before,
Break it down now, waistline, break it down now, waistline, break it.
just chopped up, and then it starts pitching up. This build is actually like really basic compared to a lot of the stuff that I have been putting out recently. It's being carried by this brass, and the flute from before now has a bunch of automations apparently. Basically just making it to get more energy towards the drop itself. I took a break in between that last part, and I immediately realized that I probably sound kind of confused about what some stuff is. I haven't opened the project file in around a month, and I doubt I just spend enough time looking at everything in the track before recording. But now we're on to the first drop, which sounds like this. So for the entire first and second drop, it all has the same drums going on throughout all of it, which it's just your normal kick, snare, rides, hats, crashes. There's not even any percussive loops going on. The kick is just a random bass house kick. You've got multiple claps being layered, some rides, hats, and some crashes that hit periodically to make the song feel more like it's moving on. The vocal that's going on throughout the entire pre-drop continues. In the second part of the repetitions, we have some offbeat vocals. And a main thing that I do very often is layering crowd noise and screams. In this, there's also some white noise because it's bass house. But that fills out the background so much. And the first thing that you hear in the drop is that scream. Going into the basses, you've got just a main sub, one main one. And all of these are just variations of it. It's all basically FMing it into this square. It sounds very boring without its processing, because most of the fattening is coming from an extremely large amount of distortion and compression, which is basically what the Distractor and Camel Crusher is. Just distortion, more distortion, multiband compression, saddest amount of stereo widening ever, and then more multiband compression mixed with being able to specifically make the lows less stereo. Then there are an extremely large amount of layers that don't do much at all. Like, you really don't even hear them. But they're there. And on every few notes, there's this part, which is made up of this thing, which, I mean, it's just some really low bass, and then a variation of the original bass, just entirely changed up. There is also on it this little sustain bass that I use in a lot of different songs. And then at the end of each 4 bars, at least for this section, all the stuff ends up getting a trance gate added to it, just to give it some more movement. Going into the next section, this is all the same. The basses, it gets replaced with a singular bass with a layer, but the main bass in this part is this, which is apparently a variation of the exact same bass that's been in the other part, but with a lot different of processing. Instead of making it a lot thicker, it's making it a lot bouncier. We've got a disperser, frequency shifting, and the same sad stereo widening and the multiband compression. and then a layer of it that is going to be very wide, just to add more energy to it. And then we've got that thing layering with the main bass. And in this part, we also have 909 snares. This part, literally exactly the same as the one before it, but now we've added in this vocal. And then it continues on into the second repetition.
Break it down, 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 down.
And then the bass that's here changes up slightly. Now onto the weirdest part of the song, I guess, where it suddenly just goes into an orchestral section. It has some light percussions in the first part as well as some crashes, and those crashes continue on with the light percussions, where it then adds in some heavier stuff. For effects, there are impacts as well as some downshifters and reverses and risers, just to give it more energy as it goes into the build. The main thing in the first part of the orchestral section is this, which is a slightly chopped up vocal that has a ton of processing on it. The processing that's giving it the texture comes from the exciter, which is just a ton of distortion. And then it just runs through a little bit of processing, and it's made entirely mono. And then it's layered an octave down, and then with a version of it that is just reverb. We then have this breath sound effect that kind of delays out, and then it does a different one. In the second half, whenever this vocal goes away, it's replaced by a bunch of choirs. As well as some strings. This choir is then recorded out and used in the outro. There are these darker, bassier strings. The main violins. And some brass. It then goes back into the same build as before, but this time with a little something different happening at the end of it. I wanted something different to happen, and for a fake out, having it saying hit him with this orchestra felt a lot more creative than just having the same thing as before. Because it then immediately goes into a orchestral section. In this orchestral section, we have a few drums that are building up to it going back into a heavy drop. Some strings and some choirs. And brass. There are a few effects in this part, but not actually that many. Just a few risers and some impacts layering with the drums above. There are then some of the same just orchestral stuff from the previous orchestral section, and all of it together sounds like this. The only different part of this drop is the main bass. It's replaced with something that's a lot more straightforward. and a lot heavier than the previous drop. Because this other bass, everything else is just the same as before. But just changing up this one thing ends up giving it a lot more energy. There's also the tape stop effect, and I guess this sub drop. But that does about everything for the song. All that's left is the outro, which is very straightforward. It's just the choir from before that I said was recorded out, just tossed down an octave. And then it just does this little plucky thing. And repeats that before it would go into the next song in the album. Alright, that's everything to this track. This is my first time doing a breakdown or anything even like it, and I doubt that I did the best job. If you did enjoy it or find anything helpful, or even if you didn't, I'm apparently supposed to tell you to like and subscribe or something like that. Anyways, I've got way more of this stuff coming, so I'll see you in the next one of whatever this is.